Today, I'd like to talk about the importance of this movement and our shared mission to build a new economy. But as my time is limited, I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but will be more than happy to pick up on the things I don't talk about in the Q&A after. Let me start with a simple statement. I am proud to be a trade union member, out of choice and out of conviction. I don't come from a family with a history of trade union activism, but my late father, my dad, a self-made man, always supported this movement, always voted Labour. Let me tell you why. He arrived in this country, in this very city, in fact, at Liverpool docks in the mid-1960s, after a long boat journey from Nigeria. It took some courage, not just because he was leaving everything that he knew, but he couldn't swim. If the boat sank, he was going to go with it. And he was seasick for the entire journey. But carrying only a battered suitcase, he made it here. He made it here to Liverpool. And he came here, like so many immigrants, to create a better life for himself, but to make a contribution as well. But like every other person of colour in the 1960s Britain that he arrived in, he faced rampant discrimination. Just remember the famous signs. I wasn't around then, but I'm sure there are people in this room who do. No Irish, no blacks, no dogs. The reason my entrepreneur father supported this movement, in fact his hero was Harold Wilson, was simple. This movement gave my father a chance. The reason those racist signs came down and my father got his opportunity was because of the trade unionists and Labour governments leading the charge for equalities legislation in the 1960s and 70s. That Congress is why I'm so proud to be speaking to you today. Too easily, I think people forget the impact that this movement has had. Sometimes, and this happens quite often in Westminster, you just shake your head at some of the rubbish you have to sit through. Government members, week after week, smearing and denigrating our trade unions. And if you just think they've just had this big push to appoint more women ministers, now that of course is great. Yet they seem to forget that these very same Conservative women have benefited from the right to equal pay, maternity leave, and all the other social reforms this movement worked so tirelessly to introduce. So they attack the very people who have helped remove the barriers to their progress. It is a disgrace, and it must stop. Now, look, maybe they think it's pro-business to attack you. It's not pro-business. Just as I am clear that you can't be pro-worker if you don't back the businesses that create decent jobs, you cannot be pro-business if you constantly attack the rights and representative organisations of the people who work in our businesses. Pro-worker, pro-business, that's our approach, that's the right approach. And of course, after all, many of the most successful FTSE 100 companies are the ones that recognise the important role of trade unions and your members. And it's an approach that is going to be more important than ever in the future. As a movement, we've always worked to ensure the right balance of power between those who have and those who do not. That ideal endures. But let's face it, I think we all know this, the context in which we seek to achieve social justice, to ensure people have good, fulfilling work, is changing. We've all seen the winds of change blowing through towns and communities across Britain. The emerging economies, globally, in the south and the east, are posing greater competition than ever to our firms and our workers. New technologies are transforming how we live, how business is done. Yes, creating new jobs, but also making many of the jobs people have done for generations disappear. And the new jobs are not always better jobs. And the thing is, we can't stop this change. We can't stop the rise of international competition. We can't stop the onward march of technology. Doing so through protectionist measures, for example, would be entirely counterproductive. But we can and we must shape these forces of change together to build the kind of jobs and the better future we want for our families, our children, our communities. We've got to ensure it's our firms which are the ones producing and creating those new technologies, the world ones, enabling us to pay our way in the world, building an economy of good jobs and higher wages for all. And Congress, for this we need you. We need you. I think, I don't know about you, but too often trade unions only come to prominence in the media when things reach crisis point, during difficult pay negotiations, when a plant is under threat, during a dispute. That essential role for you, for trade unions, will continue. But we need unions to be engaged not just in times of dispute or crisis, but much earlier in a continuous discussion, shaping the process of change I've talked about, working with our businesses to transform themselves, to harness the new technologies and compete with India, China, and beyond. So at the level of each firm, we must be ready for these kinds of discussion, as I know you are. And importantly, we need employers engaging with you, including you in this process, promoting investment in people and business, so we are producing goods and services in each business that can be sold to the world. See, I'm clear, adding value is what this movement does for our economy. And this approach is needed at the level of each industry sector too. It is essential trade unions are included and play an active part on the different sector bodies in shaping the different industrial strategies that we have. And government must, of course, play its role in the implementation of those industrial strategies across all departments, bringing employers and union representatives together to help forge that future, resolutely backing those sectors where we've got a competitive edge or we might do in the future. And look, that's not happening right now. Look at the defence industry, for example, at the beginning of this Parliament, where the government abandoned UK firms to buy off-the-shelf kit from the US. Or look at renewables and the damage caused by their U-turn on feed-in tariffs, putting the whole solar industry into peril. Or more recently, look at pharmaceuticals, where they were happy to wave through the takeover of our second biggest firm, AstraZeneca, by Pfizer, a firm with a record of intellectually asset-stripping companies and cutting R&D investment. As Ed Miliband says, we can and we must do better than this. And under Labour, our long-term plan for growth, with industrial strategy at its core, we call it Agenda 2030, that will animate the whole of government, backing our businesses and those working within them. A strategic and strong pro-worker, pro-business agenda that has us all working together, employers, trade unions, government, to ensure the UK and all of our people succeed. It's the only way we will rise to the challenge of building a new economy in this new modern global world that I've talked about. Now, the Conservatives, sorry, I've got to talk about them. They don't understand this, that you have to build an economy not on the stress fractures of conflict, but on the firm foundations of collaboration. They see workers as a threat to be controlled, not as the inspiration for everything our companies achieve. They see unions as a brake on our nation's success, not as partners in building the new shared economy we need. They say we're all in this together, but their actions, I mean, just look at Francis Maud. seek to divide and rule. And look, don't even get me started on UKIP, who take division to a whole new level. Congress, we can't meet the challenges our nation faces by setting up communities against each other, by scapegoating and blaming each other. And let's be frank, the rhetoric that seeps out of that party in respect of our fellow Europeans is not at all dissimilar from the rhetoric deployed against black and Asian people in times past. We will not stand for it. And that's why when people argue, and you'll hear it, we're all the same, they're all the same. That's why I'm resolute in my view that we're not. We're not. Because the Tory way, the UKIP way, is not the Labour way of doing things. Labour is a political party built on the power of common endeavour, the value of collaboration, the importance of solidarity, respecting people's rights and ensuring they have a voice. That's why I'm proud we voted down the move by Tory MPs to abolish trade union facilities times this Parliament. It's why I'm proud we saw off the threat of Adrian Beecroft's compensated no-fault dismissals. It's why I'm proud we blocked the proposal by Vince Cable, sorry I have to mention him too, to end the Equality and Human Rights Commission's duty to promote equality. Above all, Congress, it's why I'm proud to say we will do what this government has refused to do, launch a full inquiry held publicly into the inexcusable blacklisting of workers in the construction sector. Let me be clear. If I am given the privilege by Ed Miliband of serving as business secretary in the next Labour government, we will deliver justice to those workers who lost their livelihoods and end blacklisting for once and for all. Labour believes, not just in words, but proudly in our actions too. And in government, this will continue. We have fought to defend people's rights in opposition, and these rights, of course, are only meaningful if you can get proper redress. We're clear the current employment tribunal system is unfair, unsustainable, and has resulted in prohibitive costs. What this government has done is lock people out of the justice they are entitled to. Affordability should not be a barrier to workplace justice. It should not be a barrier to workplace justice. But look, it would also be a mistake to simply return to the system of the past where you know tribunals were so slow that meaningful justice was not always available. So I'm happy to say this today. If we are elected, the next Labour government will abolish the current system, reform the employment tribunals, and put in place a new system that ensures all workers have proper access to justice. Openness and respect, rights and justice under a future Labour government. It is this same drive for social justice that lies behind our commitment to restoring the value of the national minimum wage, with increased fines and better enforcement. It lies behind our commitment to incentivise employers to pay a living wage. It lies behind our commitment to outlaw exploitative zero-hours contracts. Because if you work hard, day in, day out, in 2014, you should not have to live in poverty or have insecurity heaped on you. And there is more. We'll take action to ensure agency workers are properly protected and that there are no exemptions from equal treatment on pay, and that includes ending the Swedish derogation. We will extend the remit of the Gangmasters Licensing Authority. Look, I could go on. But of course, all of this The red light will start showing up. But look, all of this will only happen if a Labour government is elected next year. And I should say, if you live in Scotland, the SNP would have you believe that social justice can be achieved by voting for separation. But when asked what measures in their white paper redistribute money and power from those who have it to those who do not, they have no answers because there are none. Instead, they are committed to a further 3p reduction in corporation tax for the biggest and wealthiest companies. Congress, there is only one way to achieve better social justice in this United Kingdom, and that is through the pro-worker, pro-business agenda I've talked about, which the election of a Labour government will deliver, not separation, not separation. To finish, I'd like to go back to the beginning, back to my father. And when he arrived here in Liverpool, he was filled with hope, ambition, and that's what this country represented to him, and what it proved to be all the way to his death. Due to your work protecting his rights, the infrastructure this country provided, and his ability to see the opportunity in the world, he was able to make it. That simple story of hope, hard work, rights, opportunity, and success, that's what we want for all our people, that we can lead lives where tomorrow is better than today, and above all, we can give our children more than we had. Let's work together in solidarity to make that happen. Thank you, Congress. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Chuka, thank you so much for your thoughtful and inspiring address to us. I'm now going to ask Francis to join you to facilitate a question and answer session and let you expand further.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chuka. That was the easy bit. We're now going to take questions from delegates, and we've got about 20 minutes and lots of important questions and issues to cover. So the shorter they are, the more that we'll get in, if that's okay with everyone. Please also give your name, if you can, when you ask the question. And first up, we've got 2 questions on tribunal fees from RMT and TSSA.
Right, Jennifer Gray, RMT. Good afternoon, Chuka. Millions of workers can't afford the price of justice since the employment tribunal fees were introduced, and Labour did oppose the introduction of these fees when they were in opposition. Now, although you have said you will abolish the current system that's in place, will you repeal all fees if you get into government, along with all the other condemn attacks that have been made on workers? Yes or no?
Let's take them both together.
Okay.
Can we have TSSA as well, please?
Mitch Toby, Transport Salaried Staff Association. You answered much of our question about employment tribunals, but will you, however, make a commitment that reinstating at work will be an important part of any new employment tribunal system?
Just explain what you meant there, colleague. Can you just explain what you meant by that?
Getting your job back, basically.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, as I said in the speech, our issue with their employment tribunal fee system is that it, in essence, locks people out of access to justice based on their means. We cannot carry on with that kind of system, which, as I've just said, is why we would abolish that system and put in place a new system where affordability, essentially low-income earners in our country, are not locked out of tribunals because they cannot afford to bring a claim. We are not carrying on with this system where if you don't earn enough, and frankly, it's not far off the minimum wage, the threshold at which you start paying fees, we're not carrying on with a system that stands in the way of people being able to get proper redress. Otherwise, why would we bother with all the other reforms that we want to make? And we shouldn't forget, I mean, in advance of me speaking to you, I mean, before he'd even heard my speech, the rising hope of the Tory party, who I know you love, Matthew Hancock, was already railing against our moves to introduce a bit of fairness into the system. Well, that's fine for him to do, because I don't believe, like him, that stripping away people's rights at work is the way we get growth back into this economy. We've got to invest in our people. That's ultimately what we've got to do.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from NASUWT on umbrella companies.
Good afternoon, Chuka.
Hi.
Michelle Codrington-Rogers, NASUWT, the Teachers' Union. Like you, I'm a child of recently immigrated people. And my family were really proud that I became a teacher. And however, a question I have is that in our schools, umbrella companies are monopolising the teacher supply market. They're dictating prices, they're cutting wages, and they're operating offshore for tax avoidance purposes. And this market is worth millions each to us every year. These umbrella companies are making huge profits at the expense of schools and to the detriment of teachers, flouting the law on rights for agency workers, engaging in dubious offshore tax avoidance practices and putting teachers and other workers at risk of prosecution for underpayment of taxes. Will Labour commit to ending exploitative practices by umbrella companies, ending the exploitation of agency workers and stopping private providers making a profit out of our children's education?
Great question. Great question. Let me just say, am I allowed to answer this? Right, okay. I always have to get Francis's permission before I speak to you. 3 things to say about that. Let me be absolutely clear, and Tristram Hunt, the Shadow Education Secretary, has been clear about this as well. We are not going to have for-profit schools in the system under a Labour government. We're not having that. Now, in respect of exploitation, we want to stamp out exploitation of working people wherever we find it. That's why we've said we will end exploitative 0-hours contracts, why we want to have good and better enforcement of the national minimum wage, why I said what I said in the speech about ensuring that agency workers get treated and given all the rights that they are entitled to, including by ending the Swedish derogation. The information and things you've said about the umbrella companies, I know will certainly be of interest to Tristram on the education side, but of course what you said about tax avoidance will be of interest to Ed Balls too. So if you could send us any information that you have about these umbrella companies, I'd very much appreciate that. And look, in terms of tax avoidance and tax evasion, it's important that people pay their fair share. And Ed Balls has been absolutely clear that we are going to seek to do that in government.
Great stuff, thanks. We've got a group of questions on the important issue of industrial policy, and we've got Community, Unite and CWU, please.
Good afternoon, Chuka. Robert Mooney, Community. I work for Royal Strathclyde Blenecraft Industries, a successful supported workplace where disabled workers represent a majority of employees. To a great extent of success can be attributed to union and employers working in constructive partnership through jointly lobbying the Scottish Government to reserve contracts for supported businesses. I was greatly encouraged that at the recent National Party Forum, the party committed to champion the use of reserve contracts in public sector procurement. What importance do you attach to public procurement policy as a tool to promote sustainable employment opportunities for all? Thanks, Joe.
Unite.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name's John Cooper of Unite the Union. I'm also the convener at the Vauxhall car plant just across the river. You may remember, Chuka, your visitors February of last year.
I do.
Yeah. And part of the discussions we spoke about was our concerns about procurement, or the lack of procurement within the UK. And certain commitments were given that you'd go away and seek the best possible way forward for us. The problem that we've got at the moment, like now, like then, my members are on short-time working. We work a 4-day week. Right. At the end of this month, we're laid off for another week. That's another week's wages we don't get. In November, we're laid off another week. That's another week's wages we don't get. And yet, if you walk around any street in the northwest, including my own city, Liverpool, you'll see the police driving around in Hyundais.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable. I want to know what you're going to do and the Labour Party are going to do, not to level the playing field, but to tilt it in our way to make sure the procurement has a social dimension that ensures that my members will not be laid off at the same time as the people that police our streets drive round in Korean cars.
Hi, Chuka. Andy Kerr from the Communication Workers Union. The internet is becoming increasingly central to our lives, and high-speed broadband has huge potential for creating jobs and generating growth. But we are seeing a widening of the digital divide because of the government's over-reliance on the market to deliver broadband services. The lack of public investment in broadband infrastructure means hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses, mainly in rural, but also in many deprived inner city areas, still can't access the most basic broadband connections. What commitment can you give us that the Labour government will be bolder than the Condemn coalition on broadband investment and ensure that reliable broadband services are available across the whole of the UK, not just in those areas where the market can make a profit?
Good stuff. Thanks. Thank you for those questions. So, to the colleague from Community, I think, look, government overall spends over £700 billion, but it spends around £240 billion a year procuring goods and services. And I think we can use that money when we are purchasing goods and services for the public sector to promote many more social aims beyond those this government does already. One of the ways in which we've indicated we will do this is by requiring all large companies that take on big government contracts to provide apprenticeships. I think you can also use procurement to promote payment of a living wage and to do other things too. So I could only agree that that is something, social purposes are things that you can deliver through procurement. But going to the specific question that the colleague, and good to see you again, from Unite made, since I visited GM last year, your memory is better than mine, we have actually established, myself and Michael Duggar, the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister, we've established a front bench working group with members taken from all the different front bench teams to look strategically at how we use procurement in government to back British industry. We've got to get out of this habit that says somehow we can't do anything because of EU law. We're very clear, the French, the Germans and the Dutch, they, when they're making procurement decisions, take into account the impact on growth and jobs in their countries. And they were taken to the European Court of Justice and challenged on this, and they won. The key thing is, you cannot only award contracts on the basis of what it will do for UK growth and jobs, but it can certainly be one of the criteria, and we're clear that under a Labour government it will be one of the criteria. Let me just, though, pick you up on one thing, is I don't necessarily have an issue with our police, for example, and of course those purchasing decisions are made at different levels. I don't have an issue with them buying Hyundais per se. The question is where it is made. Where is it assembled and where are the parts from? After all, for example, you could see Nissan cars being driven around, but they could be made, and the different parts in the cars, made in Sunderland. The question is where is it made? Not necessarily that the brand isn't British, but is it actually delivering jobs for your members? And I think that's what the priority should be. And on to the colleague from CWU, on broadband, I mean, I think there's a huge range of issues here. And I think this is absolutely core to our future because, of course, on the one hand, it provides a platform. You know, our children can go and run a multinational company from your bedroom if they wanted using what the internet provides. But if they're not connected into that, that's of no good. And one of the problems is, frankly, the delivery of this infrastructure is dominated by one service provider, which is BT, which is why government actually needs to take a broader view. One of the things that our Independent Infrastructure Commission will look at are precisely these kinds of issues, because it's incredibly important we get it right. But there's a whole gamut of issues we need to look at beyond connectivity, skills, how our tech sector actually promotes growth. I mean, one of the things that I've talked about and had rows about, I suppose, is, I mean, 1 in 5 people in our country does not have the basic online skills. You know that? Can you imagine if you can't send or receive an email, browse the internet, how that affects your life? So we've brought together, because this is such a cross-cutting issue, it's not just BIS or DCMS, it's all of the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, it's all the different groups. So we again have a group of shadow ministers taken from each team who are looking at how we can get this right. And also, one thing I'm rambling now, you can cut me off Paxman style if you want, Francis, but we also have to look at how government's delivering services, because I think broadband and digital enables us to deliver more efficient and effective services for our people too.
Thank you. Next question is from Prospect on Worker Voice.
Good afternoon, Sue Ferns from Prospect. We know that the decline in collective voice has resulted in more unequal and unfair workplaces, and also that organised workplaces with collective bargaining are the best antidote to this trend. What will Labour do to support unions in extending collective voice? Do you, for example, see a role for statutory underpinning for works councils in companies where unions are not currently organised?
So, a few things to say about this. I think the first thing, before you even get to collective bargaining, and I'm slightly hesitant saying this, but just hear me out. We've really got to notch up massively, I think, trade union membership in the private sector. We're about, 14.4%, I think now. Although that's risen in the last 2 years, we need to substantially increase that. And frankly, I want to see more employers giving better access to unions so that they can come and sign up members. I don't like... I just don't like, this is 2014, it's not 1914. I don't like the idea of people having to stand outside a workplace in the rain, in the snow, signing up people. And as I said in my speech, amongst our most, if not the most successful companies in the FTSE 100 are the ones who give access, who recognise the role that your conveners and members play. So access is really important. Secondly, increasingly, you'll see there's a big discussion about pushing power down and out to our regions, to our cities. And we've got local enterprise partnerships and also new combined authorities forming. It's really important, in my view, that the collective voice of trade unions is brought to bear on the local enterprise partnerships, for example. It's really important that your voice is there. And thirdly, on our different sector bodies, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah. When I first took up this post 3.5 years ago now, you were a little bit nervous about using the phrase industrial strategy and having industrial policies and the rest of it. And now it's accepted wisdom, quite rightly. But on the different boards and forums and councils that have been formed in each sector, again, it's really important that your voice is at that table. Particularly when you're looking at things like skills and how we ensure we've got a skill system that is more sensitive to the needs of business, it's essential that you are part of that conversation, that your collective voice is at the table. So I'm very clear about that.
Okay, thank you. Usdaw on self-employment, please.
Jeff Broom, Usdaw.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi. Employment has gone up in recent months, in a large part fueled by the boom in bogus self-employment and low-paid casual work. What steps will Labour take to encourage employers to offer quality jobs with proper hours and proper rights at work?
Great question. Well, the first thing to say is, and I think the TUC, you've actually done some great research into this, people who do actually want to be self-employed, they have been amongst the hardest hit by this cost of living crisis that we're facing. And if you want to now, say, come off benefit and go into starting your own business, the amount of red tape and bureaucracy that Ian Duncan Smith is erecting in the DWP for those who will, if they go on to universal credit, want to move off that and start up their own business is outrageous. But look, to go to your point, which is about those who are forced, frankly, into self-employment by employers who don't want to give them proper rights and pay and the rest, we have said that we will, for tax purposes, if you see somebody and you look at an arrangement, which to all intents and purposes is an employment arrangement, and it meets certain criteria, which we'll spell out in more detail, we will deem that person to be employed for tax purposes. And that's where we will start. because I think that will make a real difference and will stop this situation where more and more people, and of course particularly in the construction sector this is an issue, are forced into full self-employment. I mean, this is something I took an interest in from the point I was elected, and I instigated the first debate this Parliament on the floor of the House of Commons on forced self-employment. So it's a really important issue to me, and thank you for raising it as a question.
Great, thank you. We've got a couple of questions on blacklisting, GMB and UCAT.
Good afternoon, Chuka. It's Kathy Abubakar for GMB Southern Region. I know you touched on this in your speech, but this is a great question, so I'm going to ask us again. How is the Labour Party going to deal with those government departments and local authorities who still give contracts to companies involved in blacklisting?
Hi, Chuka. Stuart Grice, UCAT Construction Union. Will the next Labour government make blacklisting a criminal offence?
Okay. Well, look, first of all, can I just pay tribute to the work that UCAT, the GMB and Unite have carried out on this issue. It has been absolutely formidable, and it has put up in bright lights, frankly, an outrageous practice, which a lot of people in the media just paid no attention to. I mean, what was happening during the years of the operation of the Consulting Association is just beggars belief, and that is one of the reasons that I instigated the first full debate on blacklisting in the House of Commons in January of last year. Now look, I'm very, to a colleague who asked the question, I'm very open to whether criminal liability attaches to this, and I've also seen, for example, what the Welsh Government are doing in respect of those construction companies that were involved and subscribed to the services of the Consulting Association. But what I don't want to do now is to if you like, to prejudge the very inquiry I've just said that we will set up to look into this. So when we get in, if we get in, and everyone here hopefully will help us get in, we will set up that full inquiry. I've been very clear, I know this is a great concern in particular of UCAT. This will be in public. I want public hearings on this topic. And then we will consider the recommendations that they come forward with. And I just don't want to prejudge it, but look, I'm really open to anything that we can do to ensure that those who have suffered get proper redress, but most importantly, to ensure that this never, ever happens again in our country.
I'm conscious of the time. We've got PCS on Chekhov, hopefully a nice short question and hopefully a nice short answer to it.
Hello, Chuka. I'll shorten it, Francis. Congress will hear soon that the Home Office has declared that it will remove Chekhov as a means of collecting union subscriptions. Urged by Francis Maud, other departments are urged to follow suit. It costs next to nothing for the employer to do Chekhov, as Dali Alexander has confirmed. Removing Chekhov has been used by right-wing regimes around the world as a means of undermining trade unions. Our question, Chuka, is will you support our call for the Labour Party to include in its general election manifesto a statutory right to have union subscriptions deducted through salary by Chekhov?
Where do you start with Francis Maud? I mean, when I was talking about this divide and rule mentality, nobody personifies it more than Francis Maud. And I never understand why he keeps going down this avenue, because I think that, do you know, Francis, a neat political thing for Francis Maud to do would to be thoroughly to embrace you.
Thank you.
And this entire movement. I mean, I don't mean physically. You might not like that, but it just, the politics of it, it's stupidity. It's stupidity. But look, on Chekhov, Michael Duggar has been campaigning against what Francis has been seeking to do here, and we're very clear, we are absolutely opposed to what they are doing. Now, they haven't done it yet, and they haven't scrapped it yet, but we are doing everything we can to resist it. And I'm hoping that in the wake of the farce and disaster that was the car review, that he may back off this. I think one of the other interesting things that you are seeing happening in the Tory party right now is there are some other voices, Robert Halpern is one, Oppenheim is another, who are saying that this is just a dead end for them if they're trying to get some kind of political benefit from it. So we'll keep fighting it. And hopefully there will be no need for us to make any provision in any election manifesto on this. But take it from me, we're utterly opposed to doing away with the check-off system, utterly opposed.
Good. I am conscious of time. Chuka, are you able to take 2 more?
I think I can do 2 more.
Thank you. And if that's okay with the President, I would like to...
Do we get this light come on again? I just can't...
I do. I would like to take Unison on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, followed by, after Chuka's responded to that, followed by NUM on coal. And I'm really sorry to our other hopefuls here in terms of asking questions. We've run out of time, but Unison first and then NUM.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chuka.
Hi.
Eleanor Smith from Unison. As a nurse working in the NHS, we're concerned about the impact the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership has on the NHS. Recent statement by the European Commission implied that the publicly funded healthcare will be excluded from the regulation, but it fails to address the concerns about how the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism could be used by the multinational corporation to challenge attempts by future Labour government to repeal the Health and Social Care Act and by bringing other outsourced public services back into house. There are further concerns about the TIP, which also seeks to reduce regulation in the public interest in favour of the corporate interests. Can you confirm that Labour will oppose the TIP as a whole, rather than just focusing on the NHS?
Well, first of all, can I thank you for what you do in the NHS and the important work you do. I know how difficult it is at the moment, just speaking to many of those nurses like yourself working in the hospitals that serve my constituency, and what you are seeing happening in our A&D departments and the rest. I mean, well, you know better than us, so thank you for what you're doing. Look, I just want to be clear on TTIP. I met with the EU Commissioner for Trade, I can't pronounce his name properly, it's terrible, isn't it? Mind you, no one can pronounce my name properly. But Carl de Gucht, I met with him before the summer recess. And of course, it has, in the final shape of the agreement, we don't know exactly what that is going to look like. We are not going to see any more progress, really, until the formation of the new Commission. And my understanding and what the Commission have told me is that they are not going to be in a position to come forward with a recommended agreement to be agreed by the European Council before the next general election. It will come sometime after that. What I said to him, and I was absolutely clear about this, is if TTIP compromises or jeopardizes our NHS in any way, shape or form, then we are not going to be able to ratify that treaty. I can't say fairer than that. We would not ratify this treaty if it jeopardizes and puts our NHS into peril. But look, in terms of the rest of the agreement, as I said, these things are still, the detail of it is still being hammered out. And there are other member states who have the same concerns as us with respect to investor-state dispute resolution settlement. And that, we will obviously, when we are presented with something which is a bit more concrete, be able to come to a view on it. But I understand people's concerns about ISTS, and I absolutely understand them about the NHS.
Thank you very much. And final question from the National Union of Miners.
Nicky Wilson, NUM. Based on the fact that since February of this year, there's been 2,000 British miners living under the prospects of no future, job future, despite the fact we need coal in this country. Was Vince Cable right to turn down an application for state aid before one had been submitted and without knowing all the facts? And is it acceptable for the government to mislead the mining unions, UK Coal and their employees about the devastating effect on any subsequent state aid application of accepting a commercial loan from this government?
Well, look, it's totally unacceptable for the government to mislead anyone and to prejudge applications that are made before they are made. it's not very clear exactly what Vince Cable is doing on this issue. And just for Congress's information, obviously UK Coal owns 2 of the 3 remaining deep coal mines in the country. UK Coal is not in a good situation. It is struggling, and it is now seeking aid from the government, as a colleague from the NUM says, to try and save the over, I think, 2,000 jobs you were talking about that there are there. Caroline Flint, the Shadow Energy Secretary, and Tom Greatrix, the Shadow Energy Minister, have been pressing Vince Cable and the Department for Business to get to the bottom of exactly what they are saying about state aid and to discern whether or not they are misleading anyone. But we're very clear that you go through a proper process, and when an application is made, you consider it on its merits and you make a judgment. You don't prejudge any application by determining it before it is being made. That would not and is not the correct way to do things.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chuka. I'm wondering, Chuka, whether the questions that we weren't able to take, if we could gather those up and bring them to you, whether we could get answers back to our delegates. Would that be okay? Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, delegates, for all of those questions. I now hand back to the President.